It was a stormy night. An anonymous man was driving to his girlfriend's house when he lost control of his vehicle. He wrecked and died in a field outside of Toledo, Ohio. As his body was thrown around in the vehicle, he experienced a life review, reliving poignant moments of his life. He states that during his life review, he saw only the moments throughout his life where he felt love, not lust, but simple love, such as recognizing the beauty of a sunrise, or a moment with a friend sharing a genuine laugh. Why he was only shown the good moments of his life, the man does not know. He recalls that he received his life review in what he perceived to be a type of package, which he sometimes refers to as a book, a kind of record of his life. In his own words, he describes his life review here. After the anonymous man received his book containing his life review, he found himself back in his vehicle, still being thrown about as the car rolled. A moment later, he was propelled through the glass of the side windshield, and then he became aware that he was standing on some sort of surface in complete darkness. This dark place was somewhere that the man did not want to be, simply because he felt that there was no love there. He turned around and looked up and saw above him a tiny rectangular window of light far off in the distance. The anonymous man then reached towards the light and felt himself lifting and moving towards the window at a rapid pace. In his words, "I reached for the window of light in the distance, and then I started going up, and I started actually seeing stuff. I started to see some dark brown shades, some deep dark purples, some deep dark greens. Imagine you're at the bottom of a snow cone, a cup pointed up, inverted, and it's twirling around you like a vortex. The further I went up, the lighter it became. So I'm going up. Everything is swirling, and the light gets brighter and brighter, brighter and brighter and brighter, and then, boom, I go right through this door. It's intense. It was a door of light, dark on the outsides. It was a tall, flat rectangle, and I went straight through it. And so, I went inside. Now, imagine there's a sun right on the other side of a dark door, and you burst through. But the light is brighter than the sun. It's like 10 suns or more. It's a brilliant, blinding light. But I wasn't seeing through my eyes at this point. I was literally seeing through the center of myself, and everything was so bright. But I could tell I was in a room. Imagine 1,000 shades of light, and one little shadow of a line that would help you make out that you're in a room. You know this is a room because there's at least a little bit of shade difference over here. This light felt like it was actually going through me, and from it I felt pure love and joy and happiness, like I was a child returning home after a long absence. I just felt this being's love and just knew that it was the sum of all love. I knew that. Like this was all of it. I was an itty-bitty tiny little cell size of love, but this was all of it. Soon I became accustomed to the light around me and noticed another being next to me. There was still bright light all around us, but it wasn't like blasting light, you know. And I'm looking to my right, and here's this ball of light right there. I can't see any feet or legs, so for me to say how big it is, I can't. There's no sense of measurement. I mean, I don't know how big it was, but it looked like a ball of light. So I turned my head and I saw this orb of light up off the deck there. I knew there was a deck, I could just tell. And this being just kind of like communicates to me to come with him. I knew this being's heart. I knew its intentions. I knew what it meant. And it was really apparent that it was here for me. And this being basically said, let's go. And so we went into this cavern or cavernous-like place. Inside it's really cloudy and I notice here and there that there's colours, pinks and yellows. It was almost like being in not exactly like a seashell, but something like that, you know? It's like these cloudy pinks and yellows mostly, and then white as well. But you can see the flat floor on either side, and for as far as you can see, there are these alcoves, like arches. And when you're passing by them, inside you see like a little pulpit, and on each pulpit was what appeared to be something like a book, but different. When you looked at these books, you would start to just know what information was in them. You would actually start to experience that being's life as if you yourself were living it. What was in this unbelievably massive room was a kind of 3D recording of every single soul's light and every single spirit's light. In other words, there's spirits and there's souls. I got the impression that souls were kind of more developed than spirits. Spirits were the light of less developed aspects of creation. Even inanimate objects have a type of light. Like your guitar, you know. If something was loved, then now it has love. If there was a crystal that was loved, then it has love. If there was I don't know, it seemed like even inanimate objects had some kind of something. But every little insect, every little frog, every tree, every animal, every creature, every human, they all had a little recording of their existence from the beginning. It was like a PG-13 version, or whatever you want to call it, because inside of this hall, there's none of that ugliness, none of it. It's all been adjusted through a filter of love. Because if you look inside of every intention you've ever had in your whole life, if you're human, you probably had two intentions. One of them's your selfish intention, and one of them's your loving intention. You can do the two things at the same time, and one intention might stick out a little bit, but the other one might be back there. And a lot of people even do bad things, thinking they're doing something good somehow. But the main thing is, the intention was a loving intention. Okay. So I'm going through these rooms, and I'm realizing that the sum of experiences here is impossible to imagine. I don't know if you can understand the gravity of what I'm saying. Every individual bug, fly, or mosquito, if you go down that track, has a life, and that life is recorded in this room. Everything is in this place. Here on Earth, everything has a purpose. Every bug, tree, rock, grain of sand even. If you go down small enough, you get down to the molecular level, and even every molecule inside a grain of sand has their own type of consciousness and purpose. Every molecule is like an entity unto itself, but also a part of something bigger, as we're a part of something bigger. And I started to realize that everything is a part of one thing. Okay, so I'm in the pink and yellow space, and I'm basically going to put my book of life experiences in its rightful place. And so, I have my book, and this orb is right beside me, like preparing me to go and meet something powerful. And so I'm following this orb, and we come to these gigantic doors. These doors are made out of, chopped, I want to say cedar, but it's not cedar, it's something like that. and they have these huge ornate door knockers on them. And as I'm opening up these doors, the being that's right beside me says, "Keep your head down or you will die." And I understood him. So I'm moving forward with my head down, but I'm looking off to the sides, because I'm a curious guy. And it seems like I'm in a stadium when I look off to my right and to my left. I'm going forward, and it feels like I'm on my knees, although there's no perception of that because I can't see my knees. I don't see anything physical at all, and the light's just blasting through me. And I feel like I'm moving forward and like I'm crawling or moving, hedging my way forward and keeping my head very low. And I'm looking off to my right and my left, and there's these gigantic pillars. I mean, huge pillars, and they're marble. And embedded in them is all these crystals, all these gems and rubies and sapphires of every kind you could imagine. And every one of those little bitty gems is talking. They have a little story. It's like these are their stories, and they're stored inside of these gigantic marble things, and they're talking, and they're telling their story. It's really cool, but it's like, yeah, that's cool, that's great, but I couldn't really focus on them, because I'm sitting there about ready to have my meeting with God. I'm thinking, I'm about to meet God, and I'm moving forward, and I sense thousands and thousands and thousands of souls on either side of me, angels or whatever you want to call them. They're like cheering me on. It's kind of like, wow, this is my moment to shine, and all I got is my little bitty 10-minute film in the book. I mean, it ain't much, dude. It ain't. Then the being of light asks me, "What did you think of your life?" I was like, "Here's my video." And I said, "Thank you, God, for my life. Thank you for the flying. Thank you for my grandparents. Thank you for my mother. Thank you for my friends." I was just being thankful, right? Because I know that this being has allowed for me to have all of these relationships and for me to be a pilot. The light then said, "Did you learn enough about love?" And that's when I retorted, I've never been married, never had children. What a stupid thing to say. But I was thinking that was what God meant. Obviously, you haven't learned enough about love. It was a pretty ridiculous answer, but that's what I said. So, the second I said it, I'm booted straight out of heaven. The second I said it, that instant. And so, I get kicked out onto this road, and when they say streets of gold, you think of it as religious speak, but there it was, streets of gold. The road was kind of like a urethane or polyurethane. You could sort of see through it. It wasn't physically gold, but it looked a lot like a street of gold, with trees all around. You remember when I talked to you about the trees and the plants and things like that having lives? Well, the trees in this place looked like there was no death in them, like they're at the absolute peak of their healthiness, the absolute perfect place where there's no death, dying, nothing like that. They're flowering and blooming, and they're crisp, they're green. Every blade of grass is like vital, as opposed to what you see around here every day, which is decay and dying and death. It was just beautiful. And so I was in this big, huge, long line, and what was in front of me was really interesting in that there was all these orbs of light. It was odd because I didn't perceive myself as an orb of light. I mean, imagine you're sitting in the middle of this egg and you're looking out of it. You're not looking at your own physical self. So I'm looking at this big, long, huge line going down this golden road, and they're all walking right into this most dark door. through the darkest door. Was it the same door I entered through? I don't know. I can't tell you. But it felt like it was. Now here's where I had a succinct moment, like one of those big moments. I thought, I've done this many times before. I just knew that I had done this before, many times. Anyway, while I'm on this road, I'm just really curious about the orbs, and they're all like individual stories popping out at me, like their core selves. You could see their personalities. You could see their concepts, their thoughts, their pre-thoughts, you know? You could see what their intentions were. And we were walking together, and then boom, we just drop off into the darkness. I drop off into this darkness, and I'm falling straight down. There's no sense of how fast, but I just knew I was going really fast. But there was nothing to measure by except for the other orbs of light that were falling. I'm going along, and I see them in front of me. I see them behind me. I see them behind me, and I'm turning around looking, and then I look all the way behind me. And that's when it got really crazy, because I started seeing like a Chinese dragon behind me, or like a ladder of lights going up. It's like a ladder of lights going up, going all the way up into that door, which was light now. And as I was looking back, I could see the place where I was from the outside. It's square. I mean, heaven is square. It's a cube. It could have been rectangular, but the perspective of it was so huge and giant. But it had a top, and a bottom and sides. It could have been a rectangle, but it seemed like a square, a cube. And this is pre-Star Trek Borg, you know. It was square. It was like a big, gigantic metal spaceship. It's floating in space, and it ain't a planet, you know. It ain't round. And it's got that door, the inverse. Walking out, it's dark. But when you look back at it, it's light, and I'm falling from it. And here's the really cool part. I'm going down, and the orbs, the light orbs, are starting to peel off. Some of them are going to the left, and some to the right, others up and down. And then I start seeing stars. Just one star, 2 stars, little and faint, out there in the peripheral. And then swoosh, I'm just like blasting through the stars. I look around me and I see these orbs peeling off, going to different stars, different places. But you could see their intention, and they were so different. This is one of the things that changed me as a person, was this part of the experience. I saw how different other beings are, going to other stars, but they have a core. The same core that every other being has, which is an orb of light, which is something like love, but their perception of it is so vastly different. I mean, they say we're all alike. No, we're not. These other beings are not like us. They are very different. Their whole way of perceiving things is different. They have a core of love, yes, but they're not like us. They don't get up in the morning, raise their kids and go to work like we do. They're different. They're so different that it made the differences between me and any other human seem meaningless. There is more to this story, which I'll post in part 2. But before I go, I just want to briefly talk about a few details that really caught my attention. This idea of experiencing love and feeling a selfless love for others and all of reality is an old concept that has been, for the most part, lost by humanity due to our ever-growing egos. Kabbalah talks about this in detail. There are so many correlations to the core ideas of Kabbalah in this story that I wonder if the guy may have studied it to some degree. But I want to move on from that to the idea of the Akashic record. The anonymous man in the story speaks in detail about how his life experiences were recorded and added to an incomprehensible massive database of experiences. In fact, this database is so detailed, it is practically an exact duplicate of reality itself, which can be easily accessed and can be experienced by any observer. And this sounds exactly like the Akashic records, which spiritualists and students of theosophy and other similar studies have talked about for a number of years. If we can believe this man's story, then maybe the spiritualists have been onto something for all this time. And speaking of spiritualists and their ilk, Robert Monroe, who thought of himself as more of a scientist than a spiritualist, nevertheless delved deeply into spiritual lore as he was a proficient astral traveler. In his book Far Journeys, he spoke about a somewhat similar experience he had on another plane of existence. He talked about how he came across a large lineup of souls, for lack of a better word, who were perceived as orbs of light and were moving towards a type of portal through which they incarnated on Earth. And this sounds very reminiscent of how the man in the previous story described his return to the physical world. But as interesting as these similarities are, the most interesting aspect of this story for me was the cube that this man saw. It's such a strange idea that creation itself emanates from a giant black cube. All of the Abrahamic religions make mention of a cube in their traditions. Christianity talks of the New Jerusalem, which is described as a type of divine city and is said to be this massive cube, which is 2,200 kilometers in length. The Jewish tradition includes the use of small black cubes called tefillin, which they bind to their foreheads and left arms during morning prayer. And the Muslim faith make pilgrimage to the large black cube in Mecca, known as the Kaaba. I've heard it said that the Abrahamic faith is based on an older religion which involved the worship of Saturn. And strangely, Saturn has a weird natural feature at its north pole, which looks like a cube. I also came across this story about an artist who died for 7 minutes and returned. Quote, I knew somehow that I was dead. I was aware my brain was dying and crying out for help, but at the same time, I felt things completely separate from my body. It was like I was in a void, but could feel emotions and sensations. Despite knowing I was dead, I also knew there was a chance of me coming home. I also understood that I'd be reincarnated, but I didn't want that just yet. I wanted to return to my life here, to the material world and to my wife. I demanded that I was coming back, and I got my wish. I felt there was a whole set of possibilities, various lives and reincarnations that were being offered to me, but I didn't want them. I made it very clear that I wanted to return to my body, to my time and to my wife, and to go on living. I needed to be proactive. I said I was coming back. I said it as a demand, not a request. I had no body as such. I suppose it was a bit like swimming through water. You feel weightless and disconnected from the physical world. At one point I was travelling over the moon and I could see meteorites and all of space. I'm less fearful of death because of it, but at the same time I'm also more fearful because I've realised how precious everything I have in life is. I'm grateful just to be here, and my drive for life has been boosted. I've always thought that kindness is essential for humans to evolve and become better, but after this experience, I now feel this very deep inside me, like it's a fundamental truth. Close quote. Although he doesn't directly mention a cube in his recollection here, he has created some pieces of art that represent his experience in the afterlife. And as you can see, there is a cube featured in his work. Also, interestingly, there is this report. It is a trip report by a gentleman called Patricio Dominguez, who is a shaman and a very experienced psychonaut. A psychonaut is a term used to describe people who, under strict guidance, use psychoactive drugs to explore human consciousness. Leading up to the excerpt I'm about to show, Patricio has been describing his experience with the drug DMT under clinically controlled conditions. He talks about how his ego is stripped down to just a spark of pure awareness, and in this state, he realizes that he, as this spark of awareness, is an aspect of, and not separate from, what he calls the Creator. But listen to how he describes the Creator.
The Creator is huge, deep, wide, tall, and has aspects. Many, many aspects. This spark of consciousness that I was left with, awareness, at some point intercepts with this thing, and that recognized something. I said, I'm a part of this. I am that thing, as vast as it is I am a part, at this point, I am a part of that. So I'm the Creator. Or at least a molecule in the Creator's cube or substance. But something even more, I can even take it even further. Once I identified that I was part of the Creator, I actually recognized what part I was. And this is something that is was totally fascinating to me. In the process, again, the great search to be the shaman that I was supposed to be, I studied many, many aspects of God and deities and great sages and saints and mythical characters, all of this. When I found my place in the cube of the Creator, I actually identified which one.
This is a continuation of a video I posted earlier called He Died and Remembered Everything. As you might remember, part 1 of this story described an anonymous man who wrecked his car and died in a field outside of Toledo, Ohio. He remembered in detail his experience with God, which he describes as an inconceivably bright and pure light. He also describes heaven, which he later discovered was contained inside an enormous black cube. Here, we pick up the story just after he's left the black cube and he's plummeting through space on his return journey to his life on Earth. In his own words, "I was falling at a very fast pace, and then I start seeing stars go by, and I see these other non-human beings, these orbs, going off in different directions in front of me. I was just looking forward, you know what I mean? I'm just looking at the orbs, and I'm not paying attention really. But when I started seeing Mars, and Venus, and that sort of stuff, it caught my attention. And so I'm coming back, and then I'm seeing a little bitty tiny blue marble, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I'm about to hit the atmosphere, and then, bam, I stopped. Now I'm going to tell you about the demiurge. I couldn't tell you about the demiurge before without talking about the light first. So I don't want you to mistake these two different personalities. And so back to the story. I've stopped. I'm above the earth. And I'm like right in front of this Norman Rockwell kind of looking guy. He's big, long flowing white hair, big white beard. He had burning red eyes and a brassy face, a brass-coloured face. But he's translucent, kind of like the gold up in the cube heaven, or whatever you want to call that place. And he's severe. This guy's not somebody that you want to mess with. I mean, he's just full of, serious intent. I mean, very, very serious guy. And he's got all these star maps, and he's showing them to me. And I'm absorbing it. And he's trying to explain it to me. He's trying to explain everything to me. And I'm having to make some agreements to go into a body, and he's showing me why. This star's aligned with this, and this galaxy, and this planet, and this, and that, and he's indicating all of this on his star maps, or whatever. I understood everything he was telling me at the time, but it's like it was blanked from it's like it was taken from me. As he was explaining all of this, he opened up some new books for me, and he showed me how we interact with one another. And one way was through waves. We're in these waves, and the waves go across the whole earth, and they're like imagine an ocean and waves. And these waves go across the entire earth, an earth made of light and darkness. And he showed me how he was like a filter for the earth, a filter which caused the waves. In other words, he caused the waves by filtering light and causing darkness on the earth. Imagine putting a veil around the earth and somehow pulling and pushing the veil, affecting the light and the darkness on the earth. The light pulls up and the darkness pulls down, and so the whole earth was like a big round ball of light and dark waves caused by the demiurge. And according to him, the whole earth was in perfect balance. He was trying to explain to me how he was superior to the light, because he had this thing perfectly balanced, and everybody lined up for miles and miles to come here, because they wanted to experience what he has created here. And what he has here is this perfect balance of 2/3 light and 1/3 darkness. It's like a counterbalance, like the yin and yang thing, but it's more light than it is dark, and it's not always exactly in balance. What he was describing is that he needed me to do some things to keep the balance of light up, because if there aren't people doing light things, then the balance gets too wonky and the world gets too dark, and if it gets too dark, then it's like game over. Everybody goes home. It's done. People call him the devil, but how can a guy be the devil if he wants good things to happen, you know? He wants light things to happen. He wants love and kindness and joy in the world. But maybe he is evil in that he is selfish and wants to keep his system going. It's just because he wants to prove that he's better than, the light. God. Like he's saying, look, I got all these people that come down here, trillions of souls and spirits, they all come down here. They line up just to get here. And he creates tension. He creates tension between me and you, between me and the Catholics, me and the Baptists, me and the Muslims, me and the communists. He creates the tension to create the waves. You know what I mean? And that's what he showed me. And he showed me that it's his game, and that if I want to participate, I've got to agree to do what he says.